Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Alex Jitianu. So hello again. Why have you decided to implement an add-on mechanism? So that we could develop functionality independent of Oxygen's own release cycle. Switch. Something is not. Right, so we started to implement functionality as add-ons so we could release it more frequently to be independent of Oxygen's own release cycle. And afterwards, we started to use, it was a great opportunity for us to test our own Java API, our own SDK. And right now, we have quite a few of them available. They're quick to install, as we'll see just in a minute. And because we don't have that much time, I will just focus on two of them, the Git Client and Terminology Checker. So 10 years ago, when I came to XML Prague for the first time, there was a lot of requests from you guys to create a Git client in Oxygen. Back then, we didn't see it as a priority. There were other full-fledged Git clients out there. It would have required a lot of work from our part to have something at the same level of support. But as Oxygen became more and more used in the technical documentation community, we started to see a use case there, an interest, because the technical writers that work with the documents, they need to perform, they started to use Git more and more, and we wanted to offer them the most common used actions directly from within Oxygen, so they don't have to switch back and forth between Oxygen and another Git client. So that's how the Git client was born, mere 5 years later. So to install the Git client, you can either go to Tools, and there's a Git client entry here, and it will launch the installation wizard. Or if you go to install new add-ons in help and you connect to all the available sites, you will see all the available ones, and the Git client is one of them here. So just you select them, you follow the installation procedure, and afterwards you'll have it installed on your system. So the Git client is from within Oxygen is closely integrated with the project view. So as soon as you open a project inside the project view and you switch to this Git staging view, it will detect that you have a Git client in your project, and it will load it. You have a Git repository, and it will load it automatically. A nice feature that we have is the detection of changes in the remote repository, because a lot of our users, the technical writers, like I said, they get really scared when they hear of a conflict. So they kind of like to lock the file and work. And so this required, we were asked to help in this regard. So what we did, after trying to explain them that conflicts are not really that bad and they can be easily solved inside Oxygen, we gave up and we did this. So let's assume that another colleague of mine makes a change inside this document and commits this change. When this happens, Oxygen will automatically pick up this remote change and gives you a heads up. It says I detected a remote change, and it recommends to pull the change so that you will avoid a possible conflict in the future. So I click pull changes, and I will get this remote change. But now to see how easy it is to solve a conflict inside Oxygen, we can add here a new paragraph. Maybe make a new change here. And let's, so yeah. So as you modified files, they will appear here in the Git staging. If I double click it, it will use the Oxygen visual diff editor to show you how the file changed. We can stage them. We can give a commit message, and we commit. There's a decoration here showing you that you have new commits in your repository and you should push them. But now let's make another change here. We return to Oxygen. Again, we get the notification, but of course now it's too late. We say pull the changes, and it tells us that we have conflicts. So the conflict appears here in the remote, in the staging view. You can abort the merge and try it again if something is not, if you're not happy with the result. But so when you double click again in the visual diff mode, you see your changes on the left, you see the remote changes on the right, and you can decide what changes to take. You decide how to merge the document. You just save, and afterwards the file is placed in the stage areas, and you can solve the conflict by committing. And now we can just push these two commits. So we've talked about the dreaded conflicts. There's also a history view. So like I said, initially we started with just the basic actions, commit, push, pull, but afterwards we started to build up more and more. So now we have more features. So this is a history view. And in the last release, we also added a graph here to understand how changes diverged and how they are related to one another. For each commit, you see a list of modified resources. You have actions to compare with the previous version, with the working copy version. There's also a branch view if you want to check out remote branches or maybe delete a local one. The current branch, it's also presented in the Git staging view. There's a quick widget here to switch between the local branches.
Question.
Yes.
How do, you said this has to be in my project. Does that mean I just have to add the Git directory as one of the directories in the right hand?
It's not something mandatory. It's just we detect this to help you.
Okay, so basically when you switch between projects, if each project has a different Git repository, Oxygen will switch dynamically to the one to the current project.
Sure, but how, how do I teach Oxygen where my Git repository is?
It will just look in the entire...
In the structure of your project.
Right, so I have to add the Git directory into my project.
should be
or the other way around. So you could add an Oxygen project. It's an XPR file with.
I know, but in my case, I've long established a Git repository, and it's separate
from the project.
From my project area.
Well, in this case, you can always go in the Git staging and open the repository manually. So.
Git staging.
Yes, the Git staging view.
Oh, okay. Once I've opened it once, will it be associated with that project?
No. If they sit in different places, the project and the Git repository. Currently, no. It's something to ponder upon. The way we do it, for example, with our documentation, we write it in Dita and have a Git repository where we put all the documents. And we also keep the project inside that repository. Or you could use some modules to bring the project into.
But won't that replicate the repository in Git onto my colleague's machine?
Not sure if I understand the question. So,
if I put my XPR file in my Git repository, my colleague checks out the repository.
Okay.
He's going to have my XPR file there.
And is that a bad thing? I mean.
Yes, because he has his own preferences. He has his own.
Oh, okay.
We
Right.
have our own way of working with Oxygen.
I understand. Yes.
And our
So.
own way of working with
Ha-
Oh, in the XPR file?
You could ignore it, like add it to git ignore. Yes, but the use case is to get it. Yeah, so it's a different use case that you have. Perhaps we can match them some other way, the project and the Git repository.
That would be my use case.
For a documentation team, it makes sense for each member of it to have the same Oxygen preferences, like to minimize the changes in the document.
For technical writing, sure, but I'm
Yes.
doing a major development.
Yes, I understand. Right, another thing that we have for a given file, we have a show blame action, and we'll highlight changes in the document, and as you place the caret in a section, we'll highlight the commit when that change was performed. Let's see. And yes, and in this kebab menu here on the right, there are many more actions to clone a repository, to show tags if you want to work with tags, or stashes. If you've created a stash, you can see them and apply or delete a stash. And yeah, and also we have a number of preferences for the Git client, and you can save them to the project level. So if this way you make sure that once you open an Oxygen project, this set of options will apply. And to give you an idea of what we're doing right now, what we are working on for the next Git version, we're running short on time, but so we want to have these two options here to validate each file before committing. So when you commit from the Oxygen Git client, we'll apply, we'll validate them, and if there are validation problems, we will display an error for you to address them before committing. And also before pushing, you can choose to validate the main files. So Oxygen main files are a way of defining the entry points in your project. It might be an XSLT file. Yes.
Could it be a schematron?
Yeah.
Is it a full validation scenario?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the, in this case, it's a data map, but I've created a validation scenario, and associated with it, the validation scenario might contain a schematron file or something else. And before pushing the documents to the remote repository, that validation will be performed. And 2 more minutes.
No pressure.
Where's my project? Where's my project? So the terminology checker add-on, it's so it's a way of matching various terms and giving various suggestions to the user. It will look for the rules inside the predefined directory in your project, and these rules can be either in an XML vocabulary, like you see here on the right. You define an incorrect term. For matching that term, you use a regular expression, you give the message. But we also support veil rules. So veil is it's a linter for static analysis on prose. So if you put, and there are a number of style guides implemented in veil. So if you want to use them or start from them, you just place them inside this this directory, and Oxygen will use them automatically. And afterwards, you get inside this terminology helper view, you get all these hints and matches. For example, here it says that you should replace the name of the product with a key reference because it's a data project, or is dedicated, looks like passive voice, and it's don't do it, and many more other things like that. And what we are working on right now is, and this is, I promise this is the last thing, it's the ability to, when you write these rules, you will be able to give an expat context. So for example, I want to match on the term this, but only when the expat context includes a div. So if I'm somewhere inside the div with an ID, then only then I want to match on this term. And also I can specify which part of speech I'm referring to. So here I will match on clean, but only if it's a verb as a part of speech. This is for the next version to be released, which will be shortly. So thank you.